Welcome to the Nickolas and Natali Show, where we chat with entrepreneurs, experts, and entertainers to help you live a more fulfilling life and take your business to the next level. Today, we're chatting with Billy Samoa. Billy Samoa left his job as the head of global sales and product training at Tesla in 2019 and went all in on podcasting. Billy has an award-winning feature film, helped Solarcity scale from a small solar company to one of the largest in the country, and created the onboarding program for Tesla. He's also the creator and host of the podcast Insight Out. Before we dive in, I gotta pick your brain a little bit. Are you looking to launch or grow your own podcast? Do you want to rub shoulders alongside the best of the best in your industry? How about turning your podcast into an absolute content machine? Look no further. You can apply to work with me through the link in the show notes. I'm looking for 5 driven entrepreneurs that are ready to create a high-quality podcast that will engage their target audience as well as strengthen their brand. If you're ready to take the plunge, schedule a free consultation with me today by hitting the link in the show notes. Riddle of the week: why are piggy banks so wise? Stay tuned to the end of the episode to find out. That was the intro. Now here is the episode. Here's where I want to start. You released a film in 2009 called Rolling that was created over the course of 7 years. One of your proudest feats with this film was the environment you were able to curate on set for the cast and crew. How do you go about curating an environment on your podcast for your guest?
First time I've ever been asked that. So kudos to you, man. Great question. I think ultimately you want people to feel safe and you want people to feel heard in anything, whether that be a business, a film set, or a interview on a podcast. So for me, one of the first things I try to do is lower the guard that most people have up naturally. The best way to do that is through humor. So give you an example. And you may have heard this when you did your research, and I already know you did some research, but I had a guy on my show who made his company Sweet Fish Media because he loves Swedish fish. So
That's awesome.
I started the interview by bringing a bag of Swedish fish, and I said, do you mind if I start eating these before we get started? That's just an example, but you got to be a human ultimately. So first, lower that bar or that sort of wall that we have up. And then the second thing is, when you're talking to people, don't always think about what you're going to say next. Instead, listen. As human beings, we're constantly trying to think about what it is we should be saying instead of thinking about what that person's saying. And so I think for an interview and to create that kind of environment, you got to be listening. And then the last thing I'll share as it relates to the podcast and how to create that kind of environment is it's your vibe. It's what you do beforehand. It's the way you set up. It's how you come prepared. All the things that you do on the front end before the guest even arrives matters. And so for me, I do a lot of research. I write out the flow. I feel very comfortable. I schedule time before the interview that I don't have anything to do. I was teasing a little bit that I was teasing myself that I didn't come prepared to this one because I had back-to-back meetings. Well, honestly, that's not how I should have come to this interview, just like how I shouldn't do that when I'm interviewing somebody. So I apologize to you because it is so important to have that buffer before you show up to make sure you show up fully when you're recording.
I like that a lot because I've been dabbling to see what's the most optimal thing for myself too, like having that break beforehand. And sometimes like the nerves will get in the way or like the excitement, and it's like, oh, I'm sitting here for 30 minutes and all I can do is think about this interview. And other times it's like, I really do need a break to like be in the moment for these interviews. So I'm still trying to craft the perfect routine. So I appreciate those insights. And I think in regards to the human element, podcasting is such an interesting space in the sense of, I feel like there's almost 2 sides of it. There's the human element of like building a relationship and it's a long form, have a conversation, you get to know someone. But there's this other niche of podcasting, and I'm curious if you experience this, where it can be somewhat transactional. Like people show up, answer the questions, log out right away, on to the next thing, and just it's more transactional. Have you experienced things like that?
Yeah, no, I have. And I think a lot of times it starts with getting some long, elaborate form that you need to fill out. Like it shouldn't be work. It shouldn't be work for the guest. The guest is giving their time. So the more you can make it an experience where you're rolling out the red carpet, you're making them feel important, because they are. If you're having them on your show, they should be important to you. They should be important to your listener. They should feel like they are the show and that they're cared for, that the attention to detail that you place in making them feel comfortable and giving that kind of experience matters. So to your point, it can sometimes feel transactional, especially if the questions are being asked are super formulaic. There's no maybe follow-up questions. There's no conversational tone. It's like question. And I've done it like, hey, we all learn and we all develop. So I'm not criticizing a new podcaster. You and I have been doing this for, 3, 4, 5 years. And so we've built that muscle. And so for somebody just starting out, it is going to feel a little bit awkward. And so practice, like the more you do it, the better you get. I would say the things that you could do proactively to avoid that, going back to what I mentioned earlier, you listen, you don't just ask the question that you're supposed to ask next, ask the question that you think should be asked next. And that will be dictated by whatever it is they're saying, so that you're really listening, embracing it. And I would say, take a beat. Sometimes we feel like we have to respond the instant someone's done talking. That's not the case. You could take a moment, let it sit, because our brain sometimes has to catch up. Let it sit, make sure we're hearing it and understanding it, and then respond. As opposed to boom, 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 like a tennis match where it's like back and forth. You don't need that. It's got to have some breathing room.
I agree with that. I've definitely been guilty. I listened to some of my first episodes, not regularly. They're hard to listen to.
Totally.
But
I did that recently.
pacing,
I'm like, oh God, it's so bad.
Yeah. But I think part of me is like, it feels good about it because it's like, oh, okay, then I know I've grown since I'm like wincing at what I used to do. But the pacing is just so like, as soon as they're done talking, I'm like, okay, and then what do you think about this? And it's just, there's no pissing off. But I should say this, even in more recent episodes, I still find myself having feedback for myself on how I can improve. Like, I don't think there's been an episode where I've been like, I did that perfect, flawless, 100% host type experience. So, but I think that's also like people in general growing, but in the podcast space too.
1% better every day. I mean, like if you do an interview and you can recall the areas that you maybe weren't executing at the highest level, acknowledge that self-awareness and the ability to dissect how you show up. Most people don't have that, man. Like most people, they're kind of oblivious to their own presence and how they are perceived by others and how they show up basically. And for you to be able to do that is great. And I think that's what we should all probably be doing a little bit more, is some reflection and some just taking time to look back and say, okay, here's what went well, because that's always good to acknowledge that. Here's what didn't go well, and here's why it didn't go well. Here's some things I could do to maybe make the necessary adjustments to get better the next time. It doesn't need to be boil the ocean, change everything, but like a few things, right?
Yeah, and I think that process can be applied across the board for anything that we're trying to accomplish. I'm curious how your intentionality to being a prepared research podcast host and showing up prepared for those, how that translates into the relationships in your life too. Are you showing up in a similar way, or is it separated?
Let me think about that for a second, man. That's a great question. So the intentionality I have with the podcast, I'm not going to lie, is like next level. Just being super blunt. I probably prep too much. And what I mean by that, I was just listening to this great book, which, by the way, for any podcaster, I don't know if you've listened to this book, called Make Noise, which is a phenomenal way to be introduced to the world of podcasting. I wish I had listened to it when I first started. I didn't. I only just recently listened to it, but he says there is such a thing as being over-prepared. And so I probably over-prepare on the podcast front. I probably under-prepare on the personal relationships front. And so I think, to your question, and I think it's a good one, I think oftentimes we are in triage mode. When I say we, the collective we, societies, humans, the modern human being is just trying to get to the next thing they need to be doing that is most urgent at that time. Now, granted, there are people who are highly organized, highly prepared. They've optimized their life. I don't claim to be that person. Just super bluntly, I don't claim to have figured out that in the way in which I think some people have. But I do think it's a constant evolution that we should be looking at and thinking about. Okay, so for example, I have a meeting later today with somebody who's a client. So I calendar blocked an hour and a half to prep for that meeting. Now, had I not done that, I could have got that could have been filled by a prospective client or another call or something like that. So for me, the way in which I operate best is through my calendar. Now, everybody's going to be different. What works for me may not work for somebody else, but I am a huge believer in you set the time and that time is sacred. So actually, the next thing that I'm doing today is an hour and a half time block to prepare for 2 meetings that I have later in the day. And so that's an operational thing that works well for me. I'm sure there's other ways that have worked well for other people.
Yeah, live and die by the calendar. That's that's my motto. If it's not on the calendar, it's not going to happen. But I to your point too of respecting the calendar is something that I'm increasingly trying to work on too. I'll put time blocks of like work on this thing, and then sometimes if it's not a high priority task, but it's just something that I want to do for myself, it'll get ignored.
Dude, it's always the stuff that we do for ourselves that like it gets squashed. We will do more for other people, either to avoid looking bad or because they're expecting something from us. So we're going to do more for them than we'll do for ourselves. So have that same level. And if you have to put there's a few things that can work really well. One is work sprints or co-working. So co-working with somebody else where you hold each other accountable, or work sprints where you like have these, morning sessions. I do a morning work sprint where I'm writing every day with a co-writer, something like that. And these sorts of things can help because now you're involving someone else for the same reason that a personal trainer helps somebody and holds them accountable, gives them a greater likelihood to do the workouts and to be consistent. You can get that either with a friend or somebody that you're working with. But you're right, man. A lot of times if you don't hold those things sacred and you kind of just say, I don't need to do this, it's not urgent, then you stop doing it.
Accountability. Yeah, it's crucial. I've been thinking about I might have to be joining some Facebook groups. I think times have changed. Doing things on your own is a thing of the past. Gotta get involved in a group. Speaking of, let's say someone came up to you and they were like, hey, Billy, I want to have my independent film on Netflix. How would you manage their expectations? And what would you kind of like prep them on? This is the results you should anticipate.
That's a great question. Well, the first thing I would say is great. I love the ambition and the desire to do that. And I would want to know where they're at in the process, the development process. And then remember that it's a business. And so when a distributor buys a movie and then sells it and then gets it on Netflix, the lion's share of that revenue is going to go to them and not you. That's just the stark reality. So you can, and bear in mind, I sold my film over a decade ago. So things evolve, things change, but there are some constants that I know to be true. One is think about the end audience and think about how do you provide something that's going to be something that people want to watch. Okay. So that's really important. And when you create something, anything, whether it be a documentary or a narrative or a TV show, is there a built-in audience? So for example, if it's a documentary, maybe there's a built-in audience for true crime or for something that is in a hot space. If it's a narrative film, we know that films that have name actors or at least faces that are recognizable have a lot greater likelihood of being sold than a no-name. I was very fortunate that my movie got picked up even though I had only a few actors that were recognizable. And so that's kind of rare. Then the other thing I would think about is when you say you want to have a show on, you get something on Netflix, that's great because you kind of have the end in mind. But why? Why do you want this? Is it because you want to make a lot of money? Is it because you just have this desire to create something and you want to be, it's the creative process, it's the journey. So figure out like, what is it at a heart level that is inspiring you to want to do this? And then reverse engineer your way to get there. And so there's so many levels to how do you create something that ends up getting on Netflix or on Amazon or on these things. There's so many layers to it. And it, like you said at the top, it took me 7 years. 7 years. That means a long freaking time. So from the process of ideation and writing it to editing it to actually shooting it and then post-production and then marketing and going to film festivals, it's just a long, you don't need to take that long, by the way. Like not everybody like listening right now is going to take that long to do what I took, but it can. And so when you figure out what you're going to do, get the right people involved. Script matters. Content matters. Like the front end on the very beginning is huge. Developing the right concept. If I could do it all over again, I'd probably look at how do I bring in some more recognizable people. I had sort of an ensemble piece, and it was sort of an edgy it was about drugs. It was about drugs. It's had an edgy side to it. So maybe had less of a mass appeal than what could be. And so I'd look at that and just figure out like what types of shows do really well on Netflix. So what I would say is like horror genre might, or thriller might, some documentary might. So those would be some areas. So success leaves clues. I always say, be an inspector, an investigator, and say, okay, what right now is hot on Netflix? Why is it hot on Netflix? What did they do really, really well? Pick it apart. Be super granular, super detail oriented. Is it the way they told the story? Is it the content? Is it the theme or the genre? All these factors. And then you can start to piece together, okay, based on what I'm seeing on evidence, the evidence is that X, Y, or Z types of shows do really well. You know, like take a show like Barbarian. Barbarian blew up, but it had like I don't think it had a huge budget, but it capitalized on a few things. I don't know if you know that. It's like this Airbnb, like sort of like thriller, horror type of thing. And it blew up on Netflix. And so like, look at that. It's a great example. So if you want to do a narrative, maybe you look at something like that. Look at documentaries that do really well and then see what they've done really well. So hopefully that helps.
That definitely helps. Success leaves clues. Is there a project you have in mind? Do you have the itch to get back into it and do another one?
Yeah, I will make another movie. My priority right now is my business. And so I've spent the last 2 years working on Podify and really growing that and helping podcasters navigate the landscape of being a podcaster and showing up on all the platforms, YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. And so my goal is to grow that business to a point where I could begin to bring in other projects that could be more. I am definitely excited about the proposition of doing a documentary. At some point, I want to do another narrative film, but I would say that's probably more a 5-year trajectory as opposed to like a 2-year trajectory.
That makes sense. Let's talk about Podify a bit. How have you seen your sales skills transfer from working in the solar industry to becoming the head of global sales and product training at Tesla to now running Podify? Have you seen a direct correlation?
Yeah, man, this is a great question. So in short, yes. In a bit longer form, when you run a business, the business does at times run you. And so this is a message for anybody running a business, especially if you have sales background like I do. I've shortchanged my sales ability, or I've kind of relied on it. I've been a little bit cavalier, shall we say, in not embracing my sales knowledge. There's a knowing, doing gap. And what I mean by that, I know what to do, but I don't always do it. So an example would be follow-up. So I meet with somebody, we have a strategy session. I talk about their podcast. I may take longer than I should to follow up, I may then not do a second follow-up. And this is like sales 101. Follow-up is everything. And if you don't do a good job of following up, chances are you're going to be not realizing the same volume of efficiency and close rate as you would if you do follow up. And so luckily for us, we've still managed to do really well, but I think we probably could have done 2x as well as we've done had I done a better job of follow up. And so, but to your question about what's transferred over, so actually where I learned most of my sales skills is waiting tables. So the first thing you do when you wait a table is you do discovery. And to me, this is like if you really want to boil down sales, it's understanding. You got to understand what somebody else wants. The sooner you understand what somebody else wants, the easier you'll be able to craft a solution that delivers what they want. And so for me, as a waiter for 10 plus years, I got really good at understanding the customer. And it's not just what they tell you, it's what they don't tell you, because then you could over deliver. So maybe you could, like, I'm sort of high maintenance when I go to restaurants. I'll just be honest. And most of my friends will make a comment like, oh man, you ask for everything. And that's true. But I also take care of the people, the wait staff. I'm super nice. I'm not a jerk about it. But if somebody can tell that I am the type that likes an extra sauce, okay, maybe give that extra sauce and say, oh, I thought you might like this. Or being very attentive for somebody that, like, maybe their iced tea is not all the way down, but you fill it up quickly. So you're over delivering instead of just waiting for somebody to ask, oh, can I have a water refill? Or can I have extra ranch dressing? Or can I have some more blue cheese crumbles? Oh, I thought you might like some extra blue cheese crumbles. So these sorts of things. And so when you are in sales is about discovery, understanding what the customer wants, then clarifying and making sure you understood what they wanted, right? So check their order. And then obviously making sure that you're taking that information and you're sharing it with the necessary people to make sure that you can deliver on what they want. So you're going to over deliver on what was promised. And then working with the team to make sure that it's all done and done to their liking, delivering, right? And then once you deliver, check to make sure that that delivery was what they wanted. If it wasn't, a lot of times the best clients, the ones that love you the most, are the ones that have problems. The reason why is if you could figure out what that problem is and provide a solution or a fix, they're going to sing your praises. They're going to love you. So instead of saying, oh, it's the kitchen's fault, they forgot to make this, I'm going to take ownership. I'm so sorry. That's on me. I'm sorry I forgot to put that in. I mean, if it is, obviously don't lie, but just like, I hate when waiters lie and it's so obvious they forgot to put something in. I'd rather, no, I'm really sorry. It's totally on me. I forgot to put it in. We'll get it out right away. Can I get you a drink on the house? Something like that. So it's like all of these things. And going back to sales, you do that same thing. If something goes wrong in solar, like, oh, we had this problem. The electrical panel didn't get installed correctly. I need to fix this. Okay, I'm going to personally go to the house. I'm going to make sure that we address this and get it fixed. And so all of these things translate into the business that I'm in today, because it's very much the same thing. I got to find out what the podcaster wants, what good looks like, be very crystal clear, show them examples to make sure that we're on the same page and aligned. Okay, you don't like that. You like that. Want to change this color, want to move this branding asset here or there. And then you do that to the point where you're over communicating, you're checking in, and you're always over delivering on what you've promised. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
You said something really super valuable to me when you said probably your best clients are the ones that have the most problems. And I think oftentimes, at least personally, and I've seen this talking to other entrepreneurs, they're bummed out when problems arise. They get into like a panic, when in reality, instead of seeing them as problems, seeing them as opportunities to over deliver, like you're saying. Like, if clients don't have problems, they're not going to use your service. The whole point is you're solving a problem for them. I love that. I think that is a really good takeaway.
You can't, to your point though, it's like, instead of getting down or being deflated or letting that dictate your own mood, and just treat it as opportunity. Bottom line, treat it as opportunity. That's your chance to win this customer over and make it not just right, but beyond right. So like, just wow them? How do you do something that's going to knock their socks off, make them so pumped that they're working with you and whatever it is you do that they want to rave about it and tell everybody they know?
Let's talk about some more of possibly transferable skills. From what I know, you were in charge of the new hire onboarding experience at Tesla. And in line with what we're talking about with the clients, how does that transfer to your client's onboarding process? Because I've heard people will have buyer's remorse if they don't hear or have a good onboarding experience in the first 48 hours of purchasing something. So how do you go about crafting a nice onboarding experience for your clients?
Well, imagine you work for one of the most disruptive companies to ever exist, and you're told they don't do much for their new hires, and you need to create that experience. When people are joining Tesla, they are excited. They already have
they're pumped.
They're so pumped, right? So I can't disappoint them. The new hire experience, it has to take it to the next level, not detract and make them think, oh man, this is Tesla. Like, you don't want that. So yes, it was a big task. Global head of onboarding is not something that I ever at Tesla. It's not something I ever imagined in a million years I would have the opportunity to build that. And I had a great team. So I certainly don't take all the credit for building it, because they did all the work itself. You know, I helped to create the vision for it. I'd say in the end, there's a few things that are super valuable to remember. One is something, it's a rule in psychology called the peak end rule. And what that means and what that rule suggests is that most people remember a highlight from an experience and they remember the end of an experience. And so when you think about anything you do, really try to create moments where, and by the way, there's a great book called Power of Moments, which they talk about this. Try to create those high points, because one high point might resonate with one person, one high point might resonate with another person. And then also really think about the ending, leaving people on a high note. And so whatever it is you do, whether it be experience like new hire onboarding, or it be your end-to-end buying experience, give something at the very end that's going to be like, ooh, I can't unforget that. Like, I can't forget what I just experienced. I guess that was a double negative, but you get what I'm saying. So I would say that would be one thing that's transferable across the board, is you're constantly looking. So I'll give you an example. So when we did our new hire training, we would do a factory tour. I'll tell you what, the factory tour blew people away. Imagine being on the Tesla factory floor. It's man meets machine, and the combination of the two, building these amazing vehicles. People, that is a high point. They do not forget that. And then the end is them driving a Tesla. So it's like now they get to drive a Tesla. So it's like, and now granted, we couldn't do that for every new hire because just of logistics, but that would be the optimal way of creating an experience. That's just an example. So whatever it is you do. So I did new hire training, but I also did sales training. So in sales training, I didn't want it to be a boring sales training. So we would infuse things. So we did, instead of doing role playing, normally we would do American Idol role playing. So we had, at the time, it was like Simon, Randy, and Paula giving feedback, and it would be in front of the whole class. And so it would just create a new dynamic. Or at the end of the entire week of training, we would do Family Feud, where one side of the class would be against the other side and answering questions from the week. And so it created this experience that, like, I'm telling you, dude, people were just through the moon, excited, ramped up, revved up, excited to go do their job because they had all this energy from this experience. So those are some ways that I did that specifically to the training capacity. But no matter what it is you do, think of ways to put people in a situation that is different. So here's the other takeaway and the other insight. People remember things that surprise them. Bottom line, what they don't remember is the drive to work that they've been doing every day, because our mind, our chemistry, our brain chemistry actually is hardwired to kind of not pay attention to the things that it sees all the time. And the reason why is that you as a human being want to be protected and avoid risk. So you're constantly going to be alerted when something unusual pops up and you're going to kind of ignore the same. So it's like if you drive from point A to point B every day, you kind of forget that, like, did I just drive here? But if all of a sudden there's a new thing that you didn't expect to happen, you're going to be alerted. It's why you remember your vacations more than most every other part of your life, because it's new information that you're paying attention to. So whatever it is you do, how do you infuse surprise into that experience? Because when you have a surprise, it's a lot greater chance it'll be remembered. So those are a couple insights.
Hello friends, this is Nickolas Natali. Are you looking to take your business to the next level and expand your reach? Well, boy, do I have something for you. How about you consider starting your own podcast? As a successful entrepreneur, you already know the value of creating great content and engaging with your audience, but maybe you don't have the time, don't have the resources or expertise to produce a high quality podcast on your own. That's where my team and I come in. Our podcast creation service specializes in helping motivated entrepreneurs like you launch and grow their own podcast. From concept to launch, we'll handle every aspect of podcast production, from recording, editing, to distribution. With our help, you can leverage the power of podcasting to reach a wider audience, build your brand, and establish yourself as a thought leader in your industry. Did I mention bring in more leads? And the best part, you can do it all without sacrificing the time and energy you need to run your successful business. So why wait? Let us help you take your business to the next level with the power of podcasting. Contact us today by applying through the link in the show notes to learn more and schedule a consultation. Those are great insights. I'm getting excited just hearing about it. I feel like I need to purchase like a confetti cannon or something. So every time I get a client, I'm just going to shoot it off right in front of them to get them all worked up.
Dude, I love it.
I hear the term onboarding process all the time, but actually what you're telling me, it might be better to have an onboarding experience, something that does have an element of surprise and an element of we're going to go outside of the box, and also the extra step so you feel like you're cared about in this space, and you also know everything you need to know in a way that's exciting for both parties.
Well, we work in a new world where we're not always going to be at a physical location, but imagine you were at a physical location and you arrive, and on your desk, instead of it just being your computer or whatever is supposed to be there for you, you have a handwritten note from your boss or from the CEO. So that's just an example. But like, I think you, and when I say you, the collective you, anyone listening right now or watching right now, think about the end-to-end experience that you provide for the work that you do, and think about what can you add that whoever is experiencing it wouldn't expect. I mean, you and I could talk right now and probably brainstorm about any onboarding experience. Say, okay, so they're expecting to get their computer, they're expecting to get their phone, they're expecting to get their car, whatever they get, but maybe they're not expecting X, Y, or Z. And it could be, like I said, a handwritten note. It could be that they get a phone call. It could be that they get an email from somebody that they weren't expecting. It could be that immediately when they get started, the whole company comes over and welcomes them. It could be that they go out to lunch the first day and they get a gift. Again, I'm just spitballing here. I'm making this up, but there's always going to be a way to surprise people, to do the unexpected. If you go through life always looking for ways to do the unexpected, people are going to remember you way more than they would somebody who's just doing what is expected.
It's very true. My wheels are turning. I have all these ideas are spinning through my head. I love it. Let's go into the networking portion of, well, podcasting is networking in general, but totally. I've heard you chat about how to maintain relationships with people. A good exercise we can do is jump into our messages, go to the last message way down in the chain that we haven't talked to in a while, send a text to that person, and do that every so often to stay up to date. How do you go about maintaining relationships with guests beyond the interview? And I say that because in my experience, it's been like easy, fluid friendships form. And there's also been the other side where it's like, maybe sometimes it's more difficult because people are busier and there's, a million distractions in the world. What's your kind of workflow to keep in touch post podcast?
Well, the first thing I would suggest is create a great experience that they'll want to continue to develop and build on that relationship that you've started. So that's obvious. But then immediately see if you can, especially if it's somebody that you want to maintain a long-term relationship, figure out the mode of communication that's going to be most valuable for them. I'm a big believer that if you could get into a texting relationship with somebody soon, that helps. And so if you, let's just say hypothetically, you say, okay, Billy, hey, I would love to keep in contact. You're in Westchester, I'm in Santa Monica. Let's go grab lunch sometime. I'm like, yes, let's do it. Let's exchange numbers. Then what is some way you could provide value for that person in an unexpected way through a text? It could be an article. It could be a news thing that you found. It could be some person who might help in their business. It could be a guest. So all sorts of ways. I mean, get creative with it. But the point is, if you have their number, don't just sit on it. The longer you take, if you don't give them an email or a text right away, chances are you never will. So let's take you and I as an example. Let's say you and I text. I throw parties. Okay, you live 10 minutes from me. Next party I have, I'm gonna invite you, and
let's go.
You know what I'm saying? Let's do it. And so you're gonna show up at my party, and we're gonna have this conversation that we talked about this very thing. So now we've gone from virtual connection through a computer to a technology connection through texting to an IRL, in real life connection through you coming to my 4th of July party, whatever that may be. Okay. By the way, I do a big 4th of July party, and you're definitely welcome. So,
well, I can't wait.
Point being is you graduate into different modes of communication and then act on it quickly. I also love the idea if you're with somebody in person, take a snapshot of both of you in person and then text it to them, and then have the presence of mind to a day or two later say, hey, it was great connecting with you. If you hadn't sent them that picture, send them that picture. If you already sent it, say it was great connecting with you. Definitely want to stay in contact. As I mentioned, I throw parties or whatever it may be. It could be, I have some guests that might be a good idea. And so that's how you do that. The thing you mentioned, which I learned, I didn't learn this from Jordan Harbinger. I think he's taught a lot of other people this because I'd already been doing it, but he is well known for teaching this to so many people before I started teaching it to people. Mm-hmm. So I'll give him full credit in terms of like this idea of going back to those, he calls them dormant or weak ties, which are people that you haven't spoken to in a really long time. Go all the way back to your old text messages and then start reaching out. Now, the key thing here is you don't want people to think that you're reaching out with some sort of ulterior motive, which they might. So you want to make sure you make it clear, hey, I'm reaching out because of X, Y, or Z to catch up. I thought of you. You could say, hey, it's not urgent to get back to me. I just wanted to reach out because you popped in my mind, X, Y, or Z. Make sure they don't feel like you're trying to like get them to join an MLM or something that you want, it's a business opportunity or something like that. So that's just the one sort of caveat there, but it is super valuable. And also you don't need to go all the way back. You could go back a few months and just text somebody that you texted recently. So it's not, there's no rules to this. I think the key part is most people don't take the time to stay in contact. Yesterday, I talked to a friend from high school. He reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, hey, what's your phone number? So he was proactive there. And then we talked for like 30 minutes yesterday. He's now going to refer me a podcast client. So you never know what can result just by having these touch points.
That's so good. It's been interesting. So like I mentioned, I recently moved to Santa Monica, and developing friendships with people who are local here has been almost like an interesting experiment in parallel to how this works in podcasting. And I think what I found is true of what you're saying. If you can move to another mode of communication, it adds a level of depth to the relationship that wasn't previously there. And I think relationships, when you first meet someone, you could just become, like we're saying, like just the person I met on a Zoom or in a virtual experience. But once you move to a phone conversation, then it does develop more just by you're letting them into another part of your life, right? It's like another access point that they're not giving out to everyone, and now you're part of it.
Yeah, no, it's a powerful way to do what, and also plan, right? Like, hey, let's go grab lunch, or let's there's a great ramen place in Santa Monica. I go to my buddy's house all the time in Santa Monica, so it's like planting those seeds, right? So, and it's true. I actually have a friend that lives right in downtown Santa Monica. I might go to his house later tonight. So it's like these types of things really help, and it's friend making, and in some sense it's friend making 101, but it's also being okay with planting those little nuggets, those little seeds, those little ideas, and then delivering on them.
Here's another thing I've said. I got no segue for this, so I'm just going to jump right into it.
Yeah, do it, man.
I've heard you state that you're a recovering perfectionist and that what you put out there as your first pass doesn't need to be your final version. What version would you say your career is on?
I feel like version's an interesting point, because to your setup there, like, we mostly try to push things out or avoid pushing out our version 1s, and then we were like we're waiting for version 5 or 10, when in reality we should put out our version 1. For me, in my career, I've had sort of like, it's not just different versions, it's almost like different models and then different versions within each model. So what I would say for my career is I've had my creative filmmaking career, and I probably got to version 4 of that. I'm just ballparking. Then I had my corporate career, and I got probably to like version 10 there. Nice. And now I'm in my business entrepreneur phase, and I would say I'm at version 3. I'm still new enough to it to where I've made a bunch of mistakes, ton of mistakes, and also learned from those mistakes, and then did some really good things. And now I think I'm working on version 4. That's kind of where that's the way I would think about it, is the whatever we put out is version 1, even if we think we're waiting for version 5. And I think most people wait too long to put out what they should be putting out as their version 1.
It's interesting. I've actually never gauged for myself where I think I am version wise in my own career, but I think to your point, it's always best to put out the version that you're currently in rather than wait until that version is like ready. You know, you're going to get more feedback that way. You got another hot take that I want to jump straight into, and it's, you don't feel a need to niche down to be successful. Or, I don't know, maybe if I worded that correctly, you don't subscribe to that idea that you need to niche down to be successful. What would you advise instead of niching down to propel a career or a business?
Yeah, I mean, look, conventional wisdom says niche down, niche down, niche down, niche down. And I don't think that that's bad advice, but I don't think it's necessarily a binary niche down or die. I just don't think that's true. Now, that being said, part of niching down could also be problematic if you're not willing to try different things. So it could be genre specific and like topic specific, whether it be the type of business you're in, but it could also be like product, like, oh, I'm just sticking to this product and I'm just doing this product and that's it. And being rigid. So I think fluidity and being dynamic is absolutely crucial for whatever it is you do, because most things require some experimentation. You have a hypothesis, I think X, Y, or Z will happen, and then you do the experiment and you investigate, did my hypothesis prove out? If it did, great. I now know that what I thought to be true, based on the evidence that I've studied, is true. Maybe let me go deeper in that experiment. Or let's say that didn't prove out. So now let me test another hypothesis or a slightly different, a variation of that one, and test that. And so I'm a big believer in that approach, as opposed to going so deep into one micro little area, whether that be a product, a topic, a genre, whatever it may be, and kind of being unwilling to navigate or to flow into another area. So that's one big overarching thought. And then the other thought is, there is no police out there for you, for your podcast, for your business, telling you need to do X, Y, or Z. You got to be able to tell yourself. And so, yes, your passion matters, but more than passion, I learned this from Mark Schaefer, who I'm actually interviewing tomorrow, in 2 days, is, what do you have a sustainable interest in? Because sustainability is actually the lifeblood of success. And so what I mean by that is the only antidote or the only cure that you have for failure is not quitting. Bottom line, if you want to do anything in life, you just can't quit. Now, don't mistake not quitting for trying different things and being willing to flex. You got to be able to be flexible, because if you keep doing the same thing, expecting different results, we all know what that is. However, if you have a sustainable interest in whatever it is you're doing, and you're going to do it for 5, 10, 15 years, you're going to reach success. How quickly will depend on how quickly you navigate, how good you are at experimentation, how you're able to make the necessary adjustments, how good you are at surrounding yourself with the right people. There's a lot of factors that go into it. But I do believe if you have a sustainable interest, you could do anything you want. Anyone listening to this could do anything they want. So yes, I do think picking based on that is important, but you don't need to get so hyper niche that you feel stifled and you can't do something for a sustainable period.
Those are great thoughts. It's almost like not getting yourself stuck to where you feel like you can't move and you don't have the flexibility to change and be dynamic. And then on the flip side, as long as you don't quit, you will succeed. As long as you're willing to persevere and do things. And I think to your point, as long as this is something of interest to you for a long period of time. And I think to your point of not niching down so hard, if you have a sustainable interest, most things have like subcategories of things. Like in podcasting, you may fall in love with audio for a year and that keeps you going, but then the interviews the next year are the thing that keeps you going, and it's constantly finding those other little pockets of interest inside of the thing. I think that's a wonderful thought. I almost think of like surviving. As long as you can survive, you'll end up succeeding.
Yeah, and the other thing is that you're going to be surprised at what the right product market fit is. Most businesses, and I put this back to not only business but also creative pursuits, most fail because there's not a product market fit. And you're only going to know that by getting yourself into a place where you can test the market, see what works. If your podcast isn't working, maybe you need to make that pivot. Maybe you need to figure out another way. If your business isn't working, maybe you need to figure out, okay, why isn't this working? What's not resonating? What do people want? And so if you could crack that code, because it's like the more you could try different things till you get to that point, then you just, okay, now I'm going to supersize. Okay, I know this works. Now I need to keep doing, it's like I need to rinse and repeat. I need to figure out what widget is resonating or what service or whatever it is. And then you can continue to deliver on that once you prove the model, once you prove the product market fit.
Yeah. Get that valuable data to make the proper decisions. I dig it.
100%.
Billy, we are rapidly approaching the final question of the podcast. You made it. But before I ask the final question, I want to say how much I appreciate your hard work ethic in the intentionalness you put into your podcast and all of your creative endeavors. While I was researching you, I was really inspired because I was watching a few of the interviews you've done, and I just love seeing the faces of people being like, how did you find that? Or, like that, how you crafted that question is not something people have seen before. So I think what you're doing is such a service to the podcasting community. And I also think it's like a service and inspiration to people of, do the actual work, take this seriously, get after it. So I appreciate all you're doing. Man.
Hey, you know what? Listen, that right there made my day. So thank you for saying that. I truly, and I mean it. I don't just say that. I do truly mean it. Sometimes I forget that there are impacts of what I do beyond just making a great interview, which is hopefully inspiring somebody else to do that. And in your case, dude, I'm inspired. You clearly do the work. You clearly put the effort in. You're not just coming in, winging it and just figuring it out as you go. You've done your homework. You've done the research. You've thought about the questions. You created a flow. So flows both ways. So I feel like we're definitely in the same. We approach our craft in very similar ways. It's very apparent to me that you do your homework, you take it seriously, and to hear you say that about me is I'm honored. So thank you.
Absolutely. I appreciate you saying that. The final question of the podcast is, what does it mean to live a fulfilling life?
In the word connection. And the reason I think that's important is its connection to yourself, and its connection to other people, and its connection to what you value most. And so probably the connection to people is the most important, because if you don't have that, you're going to struggle to find the other things, the connection to your purpose, to your path, to things that you want to do, and your connection to yourself. When you connect with other people, you learn a lot about yourself. When you connect to other people, you learn about yourself as a human being. You also learn what's most important to you. And so I place a huge, huge emphasis on the power of other people in your life. I'm very fortunate that I have not battled depression like so many have. And I know part of it is just purely physiological, but I do truly believe that part of it is the friends, the people in my life. And I learned a lot from my dad, who's very much a people person, a connector and all that. And I know some people struggle. They struggle with depression. They struggle with loneliness. And I'm not trying to say that it's, easy to solve. It's not. But I do think that the more we can help everyone become more connected to those around you, I'd say that helps in innumerable ways. And so when we lead a fulfilling life, I believe it starts with the people in your life. And then beyond the people in your life, it's how do you then take the time to stay connected to yourself, either through giving yourself some time. And I need to work on this more, by the way, of given some alone time's good too. I'm not saying to just be constantly connected to people. Give yourself that reflection and that alone time. And then the other piece is the people in your life act as a feedback loop. They give you knowledge about yourself. They help to remind you of what you're great at, what your gift is, what you just did it to me just now. I sort of take for granted that I've spent the last 3 years, I bust my ass every interview. I do. Every single interview, I spend 5, 6, 7, 8 hours researching. And sometimes I need the reminder that, the validation that that's time well spent. So you just did exactly what helped remind me of that's one of my superpowers. That's one of the things that I know I'm good at. And so the people in your life help with that. So thank you. So you just demonstrated exactly what I'm trying to share.
And it's community, people being able to hold up a mirror to either our blind spots or things we forget, or,
yes.
I can't tell you how many times in my life I've needed a friend to tell me who I was when I've forgotten it. And I think there's power in that. But Billy, where can people connect with you? Where can they find you on the internet? How can they say hello?
Yeah. So the first and most important is I would love to know that you heard about it on this show. And I am very active on LinkedIn. So just type in Billy Samoa, like the island, Samoa, and find me there and just send me a DM. I check all my DMs. I might not get back to you immediately. It might take a couple days, but I try to get back to everybody in like a 2-day period at most. And if you need help with a show, with a podcast, with creating anything, just go to podify.com and then you could schedule a strategy session with me. If you want to listen to my podcast, it's Insight Out. You go to Insight Out Show and you can check out previous episodes. I love interviewing amazing people and finding out what insights have been most powerful in their life, that have been most transformative. And so I welcome any connection, because you never know what one connection could lead to. You connecting to me just now, who knows what that leads to. And I do truly believe in the power of the connectedness between all of us as humans. So, hey, thanks so much, man. This has been a real honor.
Absolutely. All those links will be in the show notes. Go click on them. Go say hi to Billy on LinkedIn. Say what's up. Billy, thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye. That was the episode. You just listened to it, Billy dropping knowledge bombs. New episodes every Friday at 6 a.m. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and share this episode with a friend that you like. It'll take 5 seconds and is a great use of your screen time and allows us to reach out to high-quality guests. The real reason you're still here, you want to know the answer to the riddle of the week. Why are piggy banks so wise? They're filled with common sense. See, we talk about money around here. We do. We're not afraid of the taboo talk of money. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed that episode with Billy, go check out episode 86 with Alex Sanfilippo. He talks about how he strived to be in the 30 under 30 Forbes list and what actually ended up happening. It's a wonderful story. Be kind, be strong, be disciplined, be obsessed. Bye!